Okay, we're going to wrap up this lecture by talking about epigenetics, which is the topic for lecturette 5. Now, what is epigenetics? And what you folks are seeing here is 3 generations of women. And in the first generation, you see that you have a mother who is pregnant and she's smoking. Now you're seeing in generation 2, yes, see the baby's red? Now this mother is grown up and she's also has a child, not a smoker, but this child, both children you folks are seeing are progressively gaining weight, okay? Which is one of the things in regards to epigenetics is what the mother does has consequences that can be inherited to the next generation. And smoking has been shown to be passed on to the next generation and leading to obesity. Okay, so your lifestyle and your parents' lifestyle will influence which one of your genes are expressed. Now, how you express your genes can be passed on to your children. Okay, these are disease states, behavioral disorders like ADHD, etc. Okay, so what is epigenetics? Let's put a succinct definition. Let's write it out together. All right, so we can say that epigenetics is changes in gene expression. Due to heredity, how do you spell that? Okay, that's heredity. I hope that's spelled right. Heredity and personal lifestyle choices. Uh-oh, I'm running out of runway. That says choices, okay? And these hereditary and personal lifestyle choices can lead to changes in phenotype. So let's talk about phenotype. So the earlier lecturette, I told you folks, geneticists call proteins phenotype because all they're working with is genes and proteins. When you talk to a biologist, phenotype is defined as an observable characteristic. Okay, now observable characteristics are defined by proteins. So both definitions of phenotype are correct. Now, what you folks are seeing here is we have now changes in gene expression of the initial child being exposed to chemicals in a cigarette that are now changing gene expression that are leading to a change in phenotype, which is obesity. Okay, now let's talk about the mechanism of how this happens. So the mechanisms of epigenetics happens at the level of DNA, right? So here we go. You folks, this is your DNA strand. And if you folks remember from previous lectures that if I want to use my DNA, I have to be in the chromatin form. That's what you folks see up top here. But when I'm not using it, and when I'm dividing my cells, it's wrapped up in these histone proteins to form chromosomes. So one of the mechanisms for epigenetics is depending what chemicals I put on my body, I can now have something called methylation. And methylation is when you have a methyl group, and if you don't remember this from chemistry, it's okay. Yes, CH3, CH4, those are methyl groups. And so what's happening here is that you put now what they call a methylation cap or a methyl group on top of your code. And if you put a methyl group on top of your code, remember, this is not a nucleotide, okay? And the body can't read this. And if you put a methylation code then on the promoter region, the ligands that are supposed to bind here to promote transcription, they can't bind. And if they can't bind, guess what? You're not turning on that gene. Okay? Now, Another mechanism is something called histone modification. And what it does is if you now are, I don't know, there's so many things that can cause histone modifications in regards to what you're doing to your body. But if you take some drug that causes your histones to change shape, right? Then what happens is that they bind way too tight to the DNA. And guess what? You can't unwind it. And if you cannot unwind the DNA on a histone, it stays more in this chromatin portion and you can't expose the genes to use it for transcription. You can't do a transcription, and therefore you cannot now express these genes. This is one of the classic examples that happens in regards to epigenetics, and this is something called fetal alcohol syndrome. And in fetal alcohol syndrome, what happens is the mother or the father, while they are trying to conceive, they're drinking a lot of alcohol, and it's causing their gametes to not express certain genes. And you can also have it if a mother is pregnant and drinking alcohol. And so alcohol causes methylation. Okay. And so certain genes don't express themselves, and it causes a phenotypical change in regards to how the face is shaped. So I used to have a lot of, they were students. I used to work at a group home, and a lot of the kids that came out had fetal alcohol syndrome. And there's a certain look that they have. And I don't want you folks to memorize this. This is not even really the best picture to describe it. It was just one that I borrowed without asking from the web. But there's a certain characteristics of what fetal alcohol children look like. And it's very easy to diagnose. Okay. Now, I did want to make a big point that it is at the level of the gametes, okay, and or fetal development. So if we're at the level of fetal development, you can have either the mom is drinking or the mom was drinking before, which means that the alcohol was methylating genes in her oocytes, and then also men. Okay, it matters what the man does, and I bring this up is because for a long time it was thought that any issues with the fetus was only because of the mom, and that's not true. And only until just this past few years that they're finding that there's a lot of issues with sperm gametes, that if you have a gamete, which is a sperm that's compromised and has methylation or histone issues, that issues with their genetic material in the sperm can be carried on to the fetus. So the mom can be drug-free, alcohol-free, everything free, but if they receive now gametes or have union with sperm that is compromised, you can have a baby with fetal alcohol syndrome. So what are we learning? Our bodies are our temples. Don't do anything. I'm laughing because last week I had 3 beers. All right, let's move on. Now, I want to wrap up this lecture and this lecturette by just showing you folks this NOVA video. And it's a really good video. It's not required, but every semester I get students that are just fascinated with epigenetics. And this is I can't remember how many minutes this is, but this is a good video to watch. All right, my beautiful people, we are done. We are moving right along. I'll see you folks for the next lecture.